Yeah. Hey guys, all right, just before the show starts, I wanted to let you guys know that my fight against cancel culture is still happening. Please go to the description below. There's a link titled Support My Fight Against Cancel Culture. If you want to help my fight, please consider giving a bit of a donation. All the information is in that link. With that being said, enjoy the show. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a new show. This show is called Tech Tuesday with Yanni Vandervalt and me, Joe Emilio. We decided to get together and talk a bit about tech. We'll talk about different things about tech. We'll talk about many different things about tech, actually. I think we have a few topics lined up already for the future. The first one tonight is what you didn't know about 3D printing. For those of you who don't know, Yanni has a 3D printer. He was able to make a cool logo for me. Well, I sent him the design of the logo, but he was able to bring it into real life in a 3D environment. And it was amazing. It was awesome. He's also been telling me a lot about 3D printing itself, the applications, the benefits. And so I thought, hey, let's do a show about it. And that's basically what tonight is all about. So Yanni, say hi.
Hey Joe, hey guys, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going good.
Good.
Cool. So let's start with this. I think the best way to start is probably to start with the definition of 3D printing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when you talk about it and you say like, "Hey, I have a 3D printer," and or I 3D printed this, you can immediately see that there's a blank on their face because like 3D print. Because when we use the word print, we usually think paper. You think a Canon or an HP printer or something, and you're printing something on paper. But with a 3D printer, you are actually printing something within 3D space. So the term, or really, that's what does 3D printing mean? 3D printing is essentially the part where you take a three-dimensional object, something that was designed in CAD, and you digitally fabricate it, but through an additive process. So, as many of you guys would have seen, sometimes when you like they call it CNC or computerized numerical cutting, I think, is where you take like a block of a material like wood or CNC and you carve something out of it, which is a reductive process. So you remove material from a block and you carve it up, but there's a lot of waste. 3D printing is the inverse of that. So you build something from nothing, very much like how you would build a house. You start with a foundation, which is your first layer, and then you start, the bricks around the house, and you slowly start building up until you get to the second floor or the roof or however it may be. So if I can quickly just show a picture, Joe, I can switch over to my
Sure.
screen of what a 3D printer looks like. And the image that we have on the screen there is essentially what a 3D printer is, and that object, that little uh, Egyptian. What doll was that again, Joe? I forgot the name.
I feel like you're putting me on the spot right now. That's how I feel about this. This is not.
Because it's an Egyptian doll.
Yes.
Is it not an Egyptian doll? Okay, well, the little
it's
doll
a it's
that's
a
on
it's
the
a
build
queen or
plate
so, I don't
there,
know. It's some I
a
don't know.
queen or something, I
It's
can't
the
remember, but
Egyptian
that's
pharaohess,
essentially,
whatever you want to call it.
yeah, that's essentially something that's designed or printed on the 3D printer. So if you think about a glue gun, for the guys that don't know what a glue gun is, it's that little device that heats up like glue sticks, and when you push in the glue stick, it melts it and it extrudes glue on the hot end side of the glue gun. A 3D printer is essentially that, but it's melting plastic, or there's also metal variants of it, and it does it in a very, very controlled way. So that is, I think, probably a very bad but really quick explanation of what 3D printing is. Should I switch back, Joe?
Sorry, forgot to unmute. Okay, so I think that's a pretty cool definition. I mean, I know you mentioned earlier, like some people may not, when they hear printing, they immediately go to the paper thing. I remember the first time I ever heard about 3D printing, I was like, how the hell is that going to work? Because the the section where the paper comes out is a very thin, like it's a very thin hole. So it's like, how do you, if you want to print something, how is that going to work and come out? So that's how I was thinking about it. I didn't know that it was a little thing that goes and then rises up. So that's interesting. Okay, so let's talk a bit about how you got into it, because I know you're a tech guy. Like, I know that you are, and I think people, fans of the show, fans of my channel, will know you by now as the tech guru. You and I have a lot of fun together. We do a lot of things together, GTA stuff. You're a gamer, but 3D printing. How did you get into that?
So that was about 5 years ago, I think. I'm a sport shooter, so I sport shoot for fun. And when you sport shoot, you go through ammunition really, really quickly, which what you then usually do is the guys start reloading their own ammunition. And when you reload ammunition, you have like a special machine. It's called a press. And that press literally sounds like a slot machine because every time you pull the lever, it makes like a clink sound and like a bullet falls out the other side. And it's like, 5 Rand coins every time you pull that lever. But that machine goes through a process. Now, one of those processes is of the part where it takes the bullet, so the tip, the projectile part of a bullet, and it seats it on top of a case. So my machine that I bought automatically does pretty much all of the stuff except for that one part. I had to use my hand to put the bullet on top of the case, and then you pull the lever, and then it does what it needs to do. And online, I saw that you could buy these machines called bullet feeders for about 9 to 14,000 Rand, depending on which one you wanted to buy. And then you typically only buy it for like one caliber. So if you wanted to shoot multiple calibers, you would need to have, multiple insets for it. And then I started looking online, and I saw people doing YouTube videos of them making DIY bullet feeders. And if I can switch to my other screen real quick, Joe, I want to show you what that looks like. And this is a very small pic. Let me do that. So this is a pic from the internet that, if you guys see, it looks really, really rough. And it's made out of a plastic paint bucket and a piece of wood, and it's just crude. And I thought to myself, you know what? If people can make that out of, those type of raw materials, then I should actually be able to 3D print one. And that was my business case, so to say, to buy my 3D printer, because I could buy my first 3D printer for about 6,000 Rand, and I could spend about 1,000 Rand, and that would, my cost would be, let's say, 8 to 9,000 Rand in total. But then in the end, I would have a bullet feeder and I would have my 3D printer. So what I then did is I started designing the bullet feeder. So I'm going to go to the next picture real quick. If it wants to allow me to go, I might need to zoom out. There we go. So I designed this little gadget, and essentially you load up all the bullets into that cavity that's like angled, and that silver plate with the slots into it would kind of like revolve, and it flips the bullets over. So what it does is essentially, if the bullets are facing wrong way around, meaning the nose, the front part of the bullet, or the business part of the bullet, is facing downwards, it would flip it over so that it faces upwards, and the back part, the part that really needs to seat into the brass, would face downwards. And essentially, it feeds into a mechanism that looks like a tot feeder. Like when you pour alcohol in a tot feeder, you put something into it and something else falls into it. And this is what my machine looks like. So there's the bullet feeder design on the top. So let me make this a little bit bigger, and then I can bring that up. So that whole device is the bullet feeder part. The only parts that I needed to really buy is this part down here. So that slinky spring that's down there would then slide the bullet up into this mechanism that's like a tot measure. And every time, like in this part at the bottom here, I'm hoping my mouse comes through. That's where the the bullets are, and it moves up, and it kind of like then pulls the bullet into it, like what a tot feeder kind of would work. And that was my business case for it. So I bought the printer, and then I started messing around, printing all kinds of random things, because now all of a sudden I had to learn CAD, and I also had to learn designing something that could be 3D printed. Because if you just think about it, if you design, like, let's say, a little block, that's an easy thing. It's, let's say, 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters, and that's an easy thing to design and print. But these mechanical parts, I kind of had to design it in parts. And I must admit, as one of my first and biggest and probably the coolest things I've designed, I had very, very little waste. Like, I didn't need to reprint parts that didn't work, because in CAD, I could draw that entire 3D object up into CAD, and I could visualize it in 3D before I even started printing anything. And the only hope that I had was that little part at the bottom here where the bullets slide would actually work. That the bullets would either slide past if it's right way around, or it would flip over if it's wrong way around. And luckily, it worked.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, like, so basically you got into 3D printing because you wanted to make more ammo.
Well, not more ammo. I wanted to make ammo faster. So with my current machine, if I had to reload by hand, if I had to place the bullets by hand, I would do about 500 to 600 rounds an hour. Whereas if I had my bullet feeder as well, it essentially doubled my reloading capacity to about 1,000 to 1,200 rounds an hour.
What?
Yeah.
So you're
So
like a
if I'm
mad scientist 3D printer. Like you just like
So if I stand there for an hour and all I do is I keep on pulling the lever, obviously you have to load, you know, a blank, brass, or like cases into
yeah,
the
yeah.
case collator, because my machine. So everything on the right hand side of this 3D printer design, so this aluminium, all these brackets, everything here I printed, everything on the right hand side of that picture is the machine that I bought. So it has a case collator,
Okay.
and that little bottom part there rotates. So it does a few things at once. When you pull it, like, it would put a primer in, it would pour powder into it, it would place a bullet, it would crimp and seat the bullet to the exact specification. Because from a sports shooting perspective, there is a couple of standards I need to adhere to, like power factor, and the ammo is kind of like calibrated for my firearm, for the discipline that I'm shooting, etc. So my machine is set up for my gun.
Okay.
And it does all of that, but I need to put the bullet on there by hand.
Yeah.
And that takes
Obviously.
time, because you need to kind of like hold it, the machine jerks and whatever. Whereas now, that dot feeder places it, I'm using the word dot feeder now, but it places it nicely into the bullet, and it would seat it not too deep that it might be too deep, which means the deeper you seat the bullet, the more you compress the air and the powder inside, and that messes with the recipe. So it seats it just enough that the next stage, because it does 5 things at once, that the next stage then seats it to the right case overall length, and crimp it so that it doesn't fall out. It,
Nice.
you know, so
So
yeah,
now you
that was
have.
when I that was my reason for buying it. And I mean, I remember the first time I came up with the idea. Sorry for interrupting, Joe, but the first time I came up with the idea, like, I told my dad about it, and I'm like, Dad, you know what? I'm buying this 3D printer. And then, you know, like you've seen with me, when the gear starts spinning, the gear starts spinning with my dad, and then we start looking into this, and like, this is like a really, really cool thing to do. And what I want to show real quick, I just want to step back to one of the first pictures in here, is, this picture where all these people are standing around this printer, and they're literally just looking at it. Like, all you're looking at it is something that's moving, and
Mm,
it might take an hour or whatever to print whatever it is that you're printing, but that is how cool it is, though, right? So I mean, the first day my dad came to visit, and I showed him the printer, and I put like something silly on the printer. I can't remember what it was, like a little block or something. Like, hey, Dad, come and check this. We would sit there, and you would literally watch this thing create this thing over time. It's like watching paint dry, but it's the coolest paint ever, though, right? So I mean,
it's like watching paint dry.
yeah,
That's a good one.
exactly.
Yeah. Look, I think I really want for us to talk about guns. But before we get into guns, let me just address some of the comments that have been coming through. First of all, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you're enjoying the conversation. We have here Donnie, J.R. Tablanche. I hope I pronounced
Blanche,
that right.
it's my
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah, he says Yanni was the reason I got into 3D printing. I thought that was a nice, something nice that he said. We have Reese Vanderfalt, who's also joined us on the stream. Thank you, Reese, for tuning in. She says, "Hey, look, two weirdos on a live stream. One of them is your husband." I'm just saying. And then Gentle Inflatable is saying, "Moi hara Yanni." And Yanni, you're getting a question from Rudy Roo, saying or asking, "I use Linux. Do you have with any experience? Sorry, with 3D printing on Linux?"
No, Rudy, I don't, but there is a 3D printing community on WhatsApp. I mean, I'm more than happy to see if I can introduce you into that community. I'm sure there's somebody else that might have played with that or used Linux
Cool. Just drop your
for
email in
3D printing.
the
So
yeah. Just drop your email in the comments, and then you guys can
I'll reach I'll reach out to him. Yeah.
yeah. And then we have Gentle Inflatables asking, "Is it expensive to 3D print?" That's a good question.
So um, gentle inflatables, no, and no with an asterisk though, because remember you have to have the upfront investment of a 3D printer though. So 3D printers can vary anything from, let's say, about 5,000 rand to the current one that I showed in the first picture that I have, which is about 15,000 rand. All the way up to probably 100,000 rand, and then we're still just talking about plastic 3D printers or 3D printers that can print plastic materials like ABS, PG, PLA, whatever, and we can talk about the different materials. What where 3D printing has really, I don't want to say made me money, but generated money for me in a way, is where you can fix a problem for somebody. So, I mean, initially when I was learning CAD, I was trying to fix every problem in the world with a 3D printer, though, right? So that was purely for me to gain the knowledge in terms of using CAD. Although I did have some CAD and 3D experience, but I needed to use CAD in a way to 3D print stuff, and that is where it comes in. So when you say is it expensive to 3D print, the material cost and whatever, no, it's not that much, because I would probably put it at average of, it's about 400 to 600 rand a kilogram, depending on how heavy the object is. And as an example, like this object, it's probably a couple of grams, so you would equate that. Where the real value comes in is from a designer perspective, is drawing the object, and you make a bit of income out of that. So I'm kind of like hoping that answers the question. But from a, if it's your own printer and you're printing for yourself perspective, it's not that expensive. Your printer has minimal maintenance. Really, it's more about the filament, and filament comes in 1 kg rolls, and it varies from about 300 to 400 rand for PLA, all the way to 600 rand for some of the more expensive filaments, and then up to probably like 1,000 rand for some of the exotic filaments like wood fill, metal fill, some of those type of filaments.
Well, to be honest, I mean, normal printing is also expensive. Like the ink can be expensive
Yeah,
depending on the
yeah.
printer. I've seen print cartridges go for 1,000 rand. So I mean, yeah. But I think to your point, like, sorry, you can return your investment, so to speak. So you can like, I mean, I don't know if you guys can see it. Yanni, I hope you don't mind me doing this.
No, go for it.
For those of you who may know Ronaldo, he did this for Ronaldo, which is there's supposed to be a keychain here. So you can make keychains, you can make a lot of different items and then sell them, or tell a company like, hey, I'll create I don't know 1,000 keychains with your logo on it, as long as it's not complicated, of course. And then you can make your money back. So there's a business opportunity, so to speak, in 3D printing where you can make your money back, which is also awesome. Like I think
Yeah.
that's amazing. And then I want to take a lot of the questions at the end, but I do think that Kalpana Soni asks you, please explain the concept of different types of 3D printers. It's fascinating.
Sure. So I don't have pictures, unfortunately, of all the different types of printers, but essentially you have the normal, um, I want to say like FDM type of printing, like fused disposition modeling printing, which is like the model design that my printer is made of, which is essentially a additive type of process that uses a filament, or it uses some form of material that's extruded, and it creates the object. From there on, you have two other types of, or well, I'm going to group them as one, but it's stereolithography, or SLA, selective laser sintering, SLS, and then the digital light process, DLP, which is like the inverse of it. It's essentially where you print inside a fluid using a laser, or using like UV light, and that's where the laser hits the fluid, it solidifies, and then it converts it into an object. But whereas the picture I showed you, the printer builds like a house, in this design it builds the house upside down. So it still starts with the foundation and the walls, but it literally lifts it out of the bucket of printing material. And that, although doesn't really have the rigidity and the strength that some of the FDM type of parts has, it does give exceptional high quality. So if you remember these old little army guys, remember those old little green army color
The
looking army
toy
guys
ones.
that stood on that little base, those little
Yeah.
toy
I have a
thingies,
few.
like that size. I can take a 3D scan of, like, let's say you, Joe, or a 3D scan of your face, and I can literally print it that big, and it will have incredible quality. Whereas the FDM printer, like the style printer that I have, my printer can go down to 0.05 millimeter layer height. So if you think about the thickness of a brick, like 0.05. So for the guys that has seen a 3D printed object, when you look at it from the side, it has like little lines on it. Those lines are the layer lines. And for the ones like that little one that you have there now, Joe, that was printed at zero point 0.2. So zero point 0.2 layer heights.
Um, so you'll see there are layers. I think technically it was printed like this on its side, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you will see some of the layers there coming. There we go, coming through. Yeah.
And then
Cool.
you have the metal printing. So you have the same type of process, so laser sintering, but you have something that prints out of the metal powder, which then solidifies the metal. And then when you're done, you take that object out, you dust it off essentially, because it's a metal powder, and you bake it at 1,000 whatever degrees, and then out comes a solid part that's printed in whatever material. And there's a few materials that you can print, print through that.
Cool. I think what's also fascinating is, and this is why we were going to talk about this, is I couldn't believe it because I found this on YouTube. And I think it was you that sent it to me, as a matter of fact. I can't remember. Someone sent it to me. And there were some people, there's like a whole YouTube channel dedicated to it. I can't remember the YouTube channel. Who it's people who make, hey, look at that. Penny Williams has become a member. Thank you so much, Penny, for becoming a member. It really means a lot to me. Thank you so much. So there was a YouTube, I don't want to say community, but like a group of people that made guns out of 3D, like 3D printed guns. And Jannie and I are gun enthusiasts. He's more one than I am. Not to say that I don't like guns. I'm not as well educated on guns as he is. And Herman Ross giving a 14 Rand super chat. Thank you, Herman. Good to have you here. Saying hi, hello, my fellow farmer who travels a lot. Go check out Herman Ross's channel, please, guys. Go subscribe. He's a very interesting guy. So yeah, tell us a bit about that. Tell us about 3D printing gun, because the one question I had immediately is, how does the plastic withstand the how does it
The
stand the heat
explosion.
and the explosion? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Joe, if we can, let me switch to one of the images again. real quick. I want to show you guys. So there's an image of a couple of 3D printed gun designs. Now this picture probably goes through a let's say a timeline of about 4 to 5 years of type of 3D printed gun designs. And the first thing that we need to obviously also understand though is that the guns we know today, like what a gun looks like, the picture, if you think about a pistol, a pistol picture comes to mind as an example, or a rifle comes to mind. The 3D printed equivalent of that doesn't really look like that. So that's why you see some of these weird looking guns that's here, like so this is called the Liberator. It's actually got a name. This is called the Liberator. So this is probably about 4 years old, the design, when the design came up with. And there is, to be honest, no real proper gun equivalent of something that would work as a gun, because for the most part these things are like a use once thing, because once it's absorbed all the energy and it's kind of gone through the process of firing a bullet, it might not really withstand the second round. But again, also is when you print a 3D gun, or when you actually make a homemade gun, the idea is not to get long-term use out of it. You kind of like doing it for the wrong reasons, in my opinion. So if I want to skip to the next one quick, so this actually, I want to go back to this picture. So this is the Liberator. So this is that first gun that I spoke about that was made a couple of years ago, and there's many iterations of this. And this was designed to shoot a .22 or like a 22 long range caliber. So it's a very, very small bullet, which still has a lot of explosive energy, but not as much as like what a 9mm or something would be. Now, guys did try and make other 9mm variants of these, but if you look at the videos, they kind of like explode for the most part, and it doesn't really project the bullet where it needs to go to. So also it's not a really, really effective gun. But soon after that, somebody came up with another design, which is called the Songbird. Now this one, and it's really hard to see from this picture, but this one actually has like a little metal pipe inside it, which acts as a barrel. And this is chambered in a 357 Magnum. So for the guys that knows a bit about firearms, that's quite a bit of kick for a 3D printed gun. Now, if you go and watch the videos where this guy tested it, I don't know how much I trust the videos though, because he shot it once, then in the one video he put a cable tie around the front, and then when he shoots it, he puts the camera on the target and then he shoots it. You don't really see him shooting it. So like, I don't know. So the only ones where I really have seen someone shoot it is the Liberator. And there's a couple of videos out. I think one of the better ones is the one that the guys, the law enforcement in Australia did, where they 3D printed the Liberator and in controlled conditions, kind of like in the cartoons, put like a little string onto the trigger, stand far away, and then pull the string type of thing. They fired it, and it fired that round successfully, and it got the kind of made the statement. But I mean, guys, it's not like people don't make guns out of pipe guns and all kinds of things today, though, right? So I mean, I don't want to. We shouldn't blame 3D printing for for guns or whatever. The problem here is just it's 3D printing is being used for the wrong reasons, in my opinion. Yeah, because if we go to like one of the next pictures, like this is a classic example of, and let me make this a bit bigger. This is a classic example of where it's really, really being abused. So for the guys that don't know, this is an AR-15. So AR-15 is an assault rifle. It's not what the AR stands for. AR stands for Armalite Model 15. So the
Jannie knows his
US,
shit.
the US is it ATF? They have a really weird way when it comes to guns and firearms, in the broad term, when it comes to defining what part the receiver is. Now, in America, it's not illegal to make your own gun. The part that is illegal and the part that needs a license is the part that they call the receiver. Now, for an AR-15, the receiver is this blue part that's 3D printed here that this guy's holding below this gun. But this part doesn't take any of the stress that the bullet needs to, that the bullet exerts on the gun when it fires. Because if you can imagine this blue part, if it sits a little bit higher here, this here is where the bolt sits. the bullet chambers in here, the barrel goes forward. This part here takes the most strain when it comes to firing that bullet. You can buy over the shelf or over the counter all of the parts you see here except for the blue part, because the blue part's the part that ATF has said makes this thing a gun, and that's the part that needs a license. So if you 3D print this part, you can make your own AR-15. That makes this one so dangerous, because the hardest working part in the gun here is not the 3D printed part. There's literally no stress on this lower receiver here, because your magazine goes in the bottom, and the trigger guard and the trigger mechanism sits below that. There's no mechanical stress on that, to the point that'll make it break. I mean, 3D printing is perfectly strong enough for this. But now you can't say that, okay, cool, the lower receiver is consistent through all guns, because if you take an AK-47 as an example, I don't have a picture of it here now, but an AK-47, that top part of the receiver, where the bolt sits and where the bullet chambers and where the barrels sit, that part is now termed as the receiver. So 3D printing and building your own AK-47 won't be as easy, because you can't buy those parts. But the part that you can 3D print in this example here is the part that they've said is now a gun. Now, all countries are different. I'm using America as an example because this is where it's an easy one. In South Africa, we treat it a whole lot differently, and in other countries as well, where kind of like almost everything is licensed. In South Africa, we can buy grips and triggers and stocks and all kinds of things, but for the most part, the frame of the gun, so the lower and upper receiver and the barrel, kind of in South Africa, is where the license portion comes in, and that makes it really tough for us to have the same thing in South Africa. I've been wanting to print one just to have an example of it, but it would be illegal to do it. So that's why I just haven't printed one.
Do it, and we'll put it on the show.
To show it like as this is a gun.
We'll put it on the show.
No, because then somebody might watch and I'll lose my privilege of owning guns. Because for us in South Africa, it's a privilege, Joe. I don't have a Second Amendment that allows me to bear arms. So,
all right, people, if you want Jannie to print a gun, say yes in the comments. I can't guarantee that we will print it, but it's just I'm doing it.
Well, Joe, for the sake of science, we might do it, but then I would also want a live stream where I destroy it afterwards using a blowtorch or something.
That's fair. That's fair.
So.
Okay. Well, there you go.
You can try.
All right. So you won't. So if you destroy it, you won't get in trouble.
No, because by the time the video goes out, it's already destroyed, and they're welcome to come and search my house then.
Okay. All right. Well, then.
Just putting it out there. I don't want them to come and search my house. But,
all right.
But the design is available online, Joe. I mean,
yeah, that's the other thing. It's not like it's a
pointless
secret.
giving names. The guys can go and Google it. But there's a guy called Control Pew or CTRL Pew. He's taken it very far down the line in printing actual gun replica parts like what's in this picture here. So, and he's done some really, really interesting research and work around that. Whereas the Liberator and the Songbird is essentially designs that is, doesn't really look like guns, but it isn't used once alternative. So that's the test that got done in the in Israel somewhere, where somebody printed the Liberator and they walked through airport scanners and they actually had a firearm inside a.
Well, that's scary.
A zone where there's no guns allowed and whatever, So that was.
Yeah, that is scary.
That definitely made some bad news.
All right, so let's move on to other aspects of 3D printing. I see everyone's comments. I will get to some of the questions a bit later. We'll have about 10 minutes where we'll tackle some questions. So keep them coming in. Don't be shy. Gentle Inflatable saying, "I want one, a 3D gun." All right. So this was interesting. We had and thank you, Herman Roos, once again for giving a 35 Rand super chat. Can Jannie 3D print a new mag for my .308?
So listen, Herman, you still owe me the grip that I need to print for you. So there's a queue. Herman reached out to me a while back, and he has, and this is a very good example of this, though, right? Regardless whether it's a gun or not. But he has a very old firearm, and I can't remember what the name of it was, Herman. But the grip is broken, and he asked if I could 3D print him a grip, and I'm like, no problem. Do you have the other side of the grip that's, the correct side, because then I can either redraw it or I was going to 3D scan the thing, inverse it, and print in 2 new ones, print in 10 new ones. It doesn't really matter what color, whatever color he wants. But me and Hardeman haven't been able to meet up. So Hardeman, I'm teasing you, but certainly challenge accepted. Let's look if we can print your magazine for your 308. So that would be a really interesting project.
Hey, that would be a good idea to maybe document for your YouTube channel. By the way, guys, Jannie does have a YouTube channel. The link is in the description below, so please go support him and give him a bit of a subscription. Or subscribe, sorry, I don't know why I said subscription. So Hendo's saying, we all want one for Christmas. And and Gentle Inflatable saying, can you 3D print me a door? Which I would imagine probably. Maybe not with the printer you have. But,
yeah, there's a company that has 3D printed furniture. So if you imagine my 3D printer, just scale the thing 10 times, like 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters. They 3D print furniture.
Well, there you go.
Which looks really cool because it looks like these modern 2075 furniture. And so I'm sure if we had one of those big 3D printers, you could 3D print it all.
All right, well, here's the thing, right? So I'm glad that you mentioned, like, if you scale your printer up 10 times, because that has been done to print not just furniture, but where would you put furniture, people? In a house. And guess what? You can 3D print a house. It is amazing. So, Jannie, tell us a bit about that.
Right, so let's switch over, Joe, to my screen, and then I want to take you guys to the picture of how houses are printed. So we can come back to this. So in this here, if you see this picture, let me make it a little bit bigger. So in this example, so the houses at the end is the houses that's now done, and it kind of like prints forward. So what they've done in this case is this printer runs on a gantry that moves along as they're printing these houses. So it does the same design, copies and pastes essentially, as it keeps on printing the design one by one. And all it really does is it, in a very controlled way, extrudes cement. So probably quick dry cement or something, because it, cement is runny and whatever. But this picture is not, this is a artistic impression, but if I just skip to one of the next ones, so here's another one that's got a top view of a much bigger house. So, I mean, the size of the house doesn't really matter. It's as how big that track is that can run and print that house. But the design is essentially the same. So, and this is what it looks like up close. So remember, Joe, when I said that there's layer heights that you print, like that little thing you showed had is 0.2 millimeter layer height. So here is a example of what the layer heights is. So each one of these layers is one of those passes where this bucket that, carefully extrudes cement would run and kind of like lay the cement down, as and how that design should be. And then it would move one level up and it would kind of like repeat the process until it's done. So that is a example. And from what I believe is these smaller houses, like these size houses, it's from start to finish in 24 hours.
Nice.
So it is a really, really quick way to start building houses. And this house is strong because it's made out of cement. Yeah. So, and as you can see, it builds all the important pieces in there, like where the windows goes, where the door goes, whatever.
Yeah, so I just want to address Tonton giving a 14 rand super chat. Thank you so much, buddy. And he asks, what happens if it's garden furniture?
If you 3D print garden furniture?
I imagine.
So does it mean like the elements, like if it's standing outside and it's exposed to the elements?
I'm not sure if he's joking or if he's asking a serious question, but I would imagine that, the plastic usually survives. We have those white, not everyone has, but everyone's seen those white plastic chairs and the white plastic tables. So, I imagine it's the same, right?
Yeah, so there's different type of plastics, and I'd mentioned it in the beginning. So as an example, this is something I did for my wife. This is let me go bigger. Sorry, Joe. Let's do this. So this is a makeup holder. for all of her brushes and, I don't know, mascaras and things. And this is a little skull design, and obviously my wife had to pimp it, and she put little things on there. I didn't print the little, flowers on there, and she has like a couple of these, and there's different sizes of them and different colors, and this is where she, places little stuff. So this is printed out of PLA, or polylactic acid, the easiest and cheapest material, and it's the starter material for everybody to 3D print with, because it's easy. It doesn't have warping issues, doesn't have weird fumes, and doesn't have weird settings that you need to fine tune your printer with to 3D print it. That won't really work well in UV light, standing out in the sun, whatever. If it gets hot, it's going to warp, and over time, the UV rays will damage it. But you can print either ASA or ABS. Now, ABS is like what Lego blocks are made of. You guys have stepped on Lego blocks. Those things are freaking hard. That's a lot more durable, and also a lot harder. And ABS, as an example, is something that you can fuse together with acetone.
Yeah.
So as a glue or as a bonding agent to it. So I would imagine if I were to 3D print furniture, you would 3D print it in ABS or something, because that will definitely survive the elements, and it is hard and durable.
Yeah. I think so. Totenkopf was actually joking. Because I said, he says, Joe, you said furniture goes inside the house, and then he asked, what about garden furniture? All right, cool, fair enough. But that was still interesting to know about the different types of plastics and all that from Jannie, so I appreciate that. All right, so let's get to well, I think you just touched on it now. Like, where else is it used?
So, can I switch my screen quickly again,
sure.
Joe? So, yes, the last example that I have of a big house. So, I mean, 3D printed house aren't just small little RDP looking houses or something, but there is an example of some really nice bigger houses, and this is an example of a double-story house that was 3D printed. The roof obviously doesn't have to be 3D printed. The roof can just be metal. But if you just imagine like how fast it is to build something like this, it kind of like explains that the complexity is no longer an issue in even tight small spaces as well, because you could construct something that would stand in between a bunch of other houses, and it will just print upwards. But where else this can be used? So here's a really, really interesting example of Bugatti. So if you guys go on Google or just go onto YouTube and search for Bugatti 3D printed brake caliper, they designed and 3D printed the brake caliper out of titanium. And it goes through that same process as I mentioned earlier, whereby it does like laser sintering within the powder of the titanium powder. And then out comes this looking object, which they then brush clean. Now these little, I call it scaffolding, but these little support structures that's here because you can't really print in mid-air. So you need to build scaffolds for it, for lack of a better word. And this they have ways of cleaning it out and breaking it away and then polishing it. And they would typically do that before it goes into the hardening process. But once it goes into the oven and they bake it for a couple of hours, not a couple of hours, probably like 24 hours or something, I can't remember, it comes out looking like this.
Holy.
And this is an example, if you think about that race, the exotic car race, where the designers are trying to make the fastest car, the first car to go to 400.
Yeah.
These cars aren't measured in 0 to 100 anymore. They're now measured to 0 to 200. There's hybrid versions of these cars that has electric motors. All of these things revolves around weight. Now, as that example, that little bearing that I printed for you, Joe, that's a print-in-place bearing. So that bearing cannot be assembled. That bearing has to be done in an additive manufacturing process, and you could take that bearing and print it in a metal printer like this, and it'll come out the same. So in this example, and if you guys watch the video, they have a camera where they mounted this caliper on like their test rig, and they spun that axle, I don't know how many thousand RPMs, and then they lock the brakes, and they slow it down, and then they spin it up again, lock the brake, slow it down, putting this thing through the extremest of tests. But the real win in the end of the day is, I think, from printing all four calipers. The calipers is something like 60% more efficient in cooling, because the caliper is designed only around where it needs strength. But in terms of weight reduction, I think it reduces something like 77 pounds of weight. I can't remember if it's pounds for all four, pounds per caliper, because these calipers are massive. I mean, you guys have seen these exotic cars. They've got like massive wheels and disc brakes and whatever. So again, now all of a sudden you have like the super fast hypercar or whatever that all of a sudden weighs 77 pounds less. I can't, like I said, I can't remember if it's times 1 or times 4, but it doesn't matter. In that example, weight makes a difference, because if you go one further, and I don't have a picture of that, but if you go one further, in aerospace industry, so the guys started 3D printing certain parts for airplanes. Boeing and Airbus is doing it, and it's simple little things that they are 3D printing, like door locking mechanisms, those little dividers that you see like between business class and economy class and whatever. Those dividers has like a 3D printed lattice structure that gives it the strength that it needs, but it weighs like 70% less than what any other version they could make weighs. And the manufacturing process is easier because there's no waste. So it's not something that's cut out of something and there's waste material or whatever. But over the lifespan of that aeroplane, even if you just reduce it by 100 kgs, over the lifespan of that aeroplane, the carbon offset obviously is minimized so much that, that's one example. Even Rolls-Royce, those guys are doing the jet blades, those type of things are 3D printed. Spaceship rockets. There's quite a few really, really interesting use cases for metal 3D printing currently that is being done today. It's not cheap enough that I can have my own metal 3D printer. I really would not mind to be able to 3D print a metal, but
That's
for
pretty
now
cool.
I'll stick with my one.
Yeah, I think we'd all like a metal 3D printer. It'd be
Yeah.
really useful because if you need a hammer or you need a nail or you need a something, you can just boom print it. All right, so very quickly, because we're almost running out of time, I would like you to tell us about the weirdest thing you have been asked to print.
So let's leave the weirdest one for last. But what's some of the coolest stuff that I had to print? And small little things, like things that you can't buy. Replacement parts for like a tumble dryer or something, like that little clip that goes in the front door that latches when the tumble dryer, when you close it, like those little things. There's a friend of mine that is, or a colleague of mine that is heavy into Mini Cooper racing and whatever. So they are like a bunch of guys that builds up Mini Coopers. So these newer looking Mini Coopers, not the old ones. And they make custom dials and custom mountings for the rev counter and turbo gauges and all kinds of things. So there is a specific item that they wanted to get, but getting it into South Africa cost like a lot of money. And I designed the dials that they wanted, and I 3D printed a couple of them for the guys. And even I made probably 10 times what it cost me on that item. They still pay 10 times less than what it would have cost for them to import it, and then even then they still made a profit when they resold it. So there's some really cool use cases if you can take an idea from someone's mind, like, hey, I want this, and you can go and design it and 3D print it. And there's another one that I want to touch on afterwards, Joe, real quick. There's a shout out I want to give to somebody, but the weirdest one that I've been asked, and I did not print it, let me just state that, is a toy for somebody for naughty time. And they wanted
No,
me
be more
to
specific. Sexy time.
sexy time. And they wanted me to 3D print a cylindrical object to specification. And
Did they want you to
that
make
has
it
definitely been the
realistic?
weirdest thing. Actually, what they wanted to do was see is like, hey, do you know if we can make a cast of something and then you can, do all that type of stuff?
No.
And then I was like, I don't know, move along.
You
I'm
know
sure
when
there's
they
somebody else
ask,
that's
can you make a cast of something?
Stay away.
Oh my word! All right, that is weird. What was the last thing you wanted to that you
Oh,
want?
yeah, this one I want to show real quick. So this is something that I've been asked a lot of times. Now, Donnie in the chat and Joe, if I may, guys, can we put some hearts in the chat for Donnie? So he's currently stuck at home, suffering through COVID, and he wasn't doing really well over the weekend, but I believe Donnie's doing a lot better. He's in chat. So Donnie, thank you very much for joining. But there is something that Donnie started doing because obviously I introduced him to 3D printing, as he said. And I want to look for his pictures. So Donnie is designing cookie cutters to specification for people. So
That's cool.
he had a real need for people wanting custom cookie cutters, and there's a lot more of these than what there was. But if they have a cookie cutter for, like, let's say, a beetle or a teddy bear or whatever, Donnie would design it and then 3D print these cookie cutters in all different sizes and whatever for them. So this is another really cool idea of like something that is relatively cheap, that is reproducible very quickly for somebody. And this is something else that Donnie did for the people that enjoy sewing and needleworking and all that type of stuff. He 3D printed and made like these little things. So this is another, somebody had an idea that Donnie could bring to life, and for the people that sewing and doing needlework and all that type of stuff. Very cool quality of life improvement, I would say. So the important thing for me here is that you take that design, you convert it into a prototype, possibly you go through one or two iterations of it, and you have a final design. And there's many of these. There's another one. This is one that my dad did, where he 3D printed the little housing that goes on the back of this light fixture, or not light fixture, security light. So these, when you move, the security light goes on. So the back part, I don't have the photo, but the back part broke, and he 3D printed a new version of that, put the screw holes in, put all the holes in the right places, and,
Put all the holes in the right places. Yeah.
He did this one for woodworking. So, this comes off a design. So for the guys that knows woodworking, this is called the push block. So you use this to protect your hands and have control over the wood when you use a table saw. And my dad had a 3D design of this one that's obviously got some improvements. As you can see, it's a lot bigger, which gives you a lot more control over the material. But again, endless possibilities.
Endless. This is fascinating. I think, I want to thank Henk Klopper for becoming a member. Thank you so much. It's greatly appreciated. All right, so everyone gave hearts to Donnie, but Donnie seems to be MIA, which is understandable. It's fine. All right, so all right, I'm gonna get to some of the questions that we've received. I'll give it another extra 5 minutes because there were a few questions. So I'll start from the bottom, work my way up. Kalpani Soni asking, can you print any currency or gold bars?
No.
You say that like you've tried.
I can print you a plastic version of it. So I did print a Bitcoin. So what did go through my mind, just I did print a Bitcoin. But what it looked like was a coin with a Bitcoin B, the B with the $2 stripes through it. I did print one of those, but it's not a real Bitcoin. So that went through my mind, but no. And gold, that's a very precious metal. I don't think.
Yeah, you would need
gold
to.
Would be something you print with.
I mean,
easily.
if you, that's weird. Like, why would you buy gold, right? Because you would need gold to print gold. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
All right, so let's see here. Some other. If you guys have any other questions, please drop them in. We got BHaveZ307 asking, Jeremiah, does Jannie have any recommendations for where one can learn CAD?
BHaveZ307 YouTube. That's how I learned CAD. So if I can make a recommendation though, one of the better applications, and we've tried a few, and when I mean we've, the people in the community have tried a few. Autodesk Fusion 360 is probably one of the nicer ones out there, and as a DIY enthusiast, it's available for free, so you don't need to license it or anything. There's another nice one, although I don't like its licensing model, which is Onshape. Onshape completely runs inside your browser, which is really awesome, but they have a very weird terms and conditions, which means any design that you do upload onto their platform and design on their platform is actually owned by them. So, be careful if you are designing for your next million. I wouldn't use Onshape, although my bullet feeder that I designed was designed in Onshape, and I subsequently, after they've changed their licensing to be really weird, I've moved over onto Autodesk Fusion 360, which works great, and there's a lot of material on the on YouTube that teaches you Fusion 360.
Cool. I like this one. Gentle Inflatables asking, how much would that gun cost to print?
How much would it cost to print? It's not big. Probably $100 or something.
Not bad. It's cheaper than an actual gun.
Yeah. It's a lot cheaper than an actual gun. Probably like $100. I mean, regardless of what material you use, it's not that big. It's not that heavy. It's a plastic gun. I mean, like $100 probably.
Okay, and Jannie, this is from Rudy Roo, what are the tolerances on 3D printing? Can you get it close to machined surface?
So no, not machine surface. Sorry, Joe. Somebody asked if I could put a link in there. Guys, I did put the link to Autodesk Fusion 360 in chat. So no, you can't, not machine. So 3D printing is pretty accurate. If I talk from my experience where I've designed parts that need to fit into each other. In some cases, you may need to deal with shrinking and whatever a little bit, like depending on the material that you're printing, etc. But for the most part, if you design two parts that need to fit into each other, they actually fit into each other. If you designed the two parts yourself and you printed them on the same printer, calibration is consistent, etc. It's pretty accurate. I would be really hard to guess, like how accurate, probably like 0.1 or 0.2 millimeters accuracy. So for the purpose of where you use it and what you're doing with it, I think that is definitely, in my opinion, very, very accurate. For whatever I've used it for. So in terms of machine accuracy, I know he's referring to like CNC and that type of stuff. No, because those machines are like fractions of a millimeter accurate. 3D printing is not quite there yet. Maybe like with the metal type of printers and the powder printers, they're a little bit more accurate, but the plastic printers that we have access to from a home use perspective is, like at least 0.1 or 0.2 of a millimeter, I suppose, accurate.
So we have another question.
Which I think is accurate enough. I mean, that's
Sorry. Cool. So we have another question from BHaveZ307 asking, what is a good 3D printer to buy for a beginner? Excellent question.
So that's a good question. So I'm in two minds when it comes to that, though, because you can buy an entry-level printer for, let's call it sub 10,000 Rand. And in the sub 10,000 Rand space, you have a couple of options, because your first 3D printer is going to be too small. Let me just put that out there. Because the first thing you want to do is print something bigger than what you can print on your printer. So below 10,000 Rand, the printers are roughly 200 by 200, so 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters by about 20 centimeters cubed. So, Joe, I don't know if you have a ruler close by.
I do.
But 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters cubed.
So that's like, I don't know if people can see, but it's actually not that.
Yeah.
It's not that big.
Yeah. So a cube of that. So for the most part, all these things like this little thing here, those will all fit comfortably on that print bed. Here's another cool design, Joe. Let's show this. I know that looked weird, but guys, this is a paint roller washer. I don't know what the right word for it is. But you put this thing in a hose pipe. It's got little holes in here. that sprays water onto a paintbrush, and you wash your brushes perfectly clean, and they come out fluffy on the other side. You don't have to throw away your brushes. But back to the question, though. So I think I'm in two minds about that, because my first printer was a kit printer, so I built it myself. You learn a lot about your printer, assembling your printer yourself from like hundreds of parts. So if you have that option, try and do that. The community is big enough, the internet's big enough, you'll get your way through that. Other than that, in terms of like some of the brands, the Creality Ender series printers are really, really nice. The only thing I would look out for there, though, the smaller printers, and if you are looking at that, sorry, this is going to sound really techy now. The Z-axis, so the part that lifts the gantry, the cheap printers only has one stepper motor on the Z-axis, which means it has one motor that lifts the entire um, Y carriage. But the other printers, like in the picture, if I can quickly switch to screen show that, in this picture, if you see that there's rods on the left and the right hand side, like that would be a printer that's got a motor on both axes. That just gives you a lot of accuracy and durability on your printer to have two motors. So watch out for that. So I would say in the Creality series, buy one of the printers that, the first printer that's in your budget that at least has two Z motors. And the
So,
Creality printers aren't bad.
so realistically, in your own opinion, how much should one, if one wants to buy a printer, how much should one save? Like, what's the goal to save up to? How much would you say budget? Like, budget for how much? How much are we talking?
Budget about 10,000 Rand, because it's pointless having a printer and no filament. And once you buy 2 rolls of filament, you're going to buy 20 rolls of filament because you want yellow, red, green, blue, purple, black, brown, silver, whatever. So there's that. And then there's one or two little other things you need around that. You do need space for the printer as well. So you do need nozzles. So nozzles is that little bottom part. I don't really have a photo of it, where the filament extrudes. That little hole is 0.4 millimeters big. So they clog up over time. There's ways of cleaning them and whatever, but I mean, it's good to have nozzles as spares. It's good to have fans as spares. And then bearings and thermistors, the heaters. It's not expensive spares. I mean, the spares would probably run you in total of about 500 Rand, I would guess. Then you have like enough of everything. But I would say, yeah, save up to whatever your printer costs plus about 2,000 to 3,000 Rand.
And
so do that as an example.
We didn't touch on this, but I learned this when we were printing this thing, the logo. You can print in different colors. So for those of you who are watching, you can see this. This is not glued to the base. This is like it was printed in one go. All this stuff was printed in one go. But the feathers here, that's stuck on because color is limited. But I guess it also depends on the printer, correct?
Yeah. So, Joe, the printer that I have, the Joseph Prusa Mark III, has something that's called a multi-material upgrade, or an MMU. And in this case, this MMU, if you see, there's like one little tube that runs to the hot end. Yeah. At the back of that, it's like a 5-in-1 changer. So my printer intelligently changes color, and I can change up to 5 colors. By itself. So the normal printers can't do that. It'll only print one color, and you can change colors if you want manually, though, but not to the same accuracy as what mine does it. Now, that's hard to explain. So if you imagine when you build a house, okay, my printer will be able to print every brick a different color. And a brick is a layer, in an example like when we printed the house. Because I can, on the same level, so the same Z height, I can print different colors, whereas a normal printer that by default only prints one color has to print the entire layer in one color. So the whole next layer of bricks, all of them will be the same color. So you'll have like different color lines as opposed to mine having different color bricks. So that is why my printer is about 15,000 Rand, because that upgrade part for my printer adds a little bit of cost to that, but also I've been in 3D printing for almost 5 years now, and or almost 6 years now, and my printer is almost like paid for itself and kind of like paid for the next one. So
That's cool.
yeah,
All right. So, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that kind of brings us to the end of the show. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed it. We will be back in a few weeks from now. I think it's the first Tuesday or the second Tuesday
it's the
in
sixth of
October.
October.
Yes, we'll be talking about retro gaming, which I'm very
Yeah.
excited about. We're going to take I don't know, a tour through the ages with gaming. How did gaming start? Where it's gone to, how it's affected other tech in the world, and how it continues to, you'd be surprised, shape our lives. And obviously, we'll touch on all the old classic games as well. Super Mario, for one. And for those of you who are probably the age of, I would say, above 30, maybe 28 to above, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will be back here at 8:30 tonight. I'm discussing a very interesting topic. Well, it's interesting, but at the same time, a touchy subject. Something that's been happening now recently in our society. Some people are asking the question, are we normalizing pedophilia? And I will have Dr. DNA, a philosopher, on my show, and we will be discussing just that. So that's all I'm going to say about that. So please come on and join us and give us your thoughts. Other than that, Jannie, thank you so much for this, man. I'm looking forward to the next one. Thank you. I don't know if you want to say
Awesome.
something.
Yeah, guys, I put a link in chat. It's from Do Thingiverse. So if you know what YouTube is like for videos and Pinterest is for photos, Thingiverse is for 3D printed objects. So I'm going to punish you, but if you want to take a quiz through that, it's a community-driven project where a lot of people upload their 3D printed designs, where somebody like me can go and download that. And depending on the licensing that it's published under, I can either 3D print it for profit or not profit or whatever, but it doesn't really matter. There is thousands of designs on there, which is really cool to go and have a look through because it shows you the breadth of what can be 3D printed and what people around the globe has designed.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jannie. And thank you to all the viewers once again for tuning in. Thank you for all the super chats. And thank you to the new members. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for your support. Like I said, we'll be back again with Tech Tuesday. And if you have something in tech that you want us to discuss on the show, please leave a comment and we will schedule it in at some point and we will talk. We got more topics coming up. We got tech about elders, like maybe helping some of the elderly people get through technology. We're definitely going to have a debate on Samsung versus iPhone. Jannie likes to call it Android versus iOS. So there's a lot of topics that we're going to be discussing in the future. So please subscribe to my channel if you're new to my channel and hit that bell notification so you can get all the updates. But other than that, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you here at 8:30. Once again, Jannie, thank you so much. And remember, stay safe, be kind to one another, and I'll see you at the next one. Cheers. Hey guys, so if you enjoyed the show, please consider giving it a like and a share. Don't forget to subscribe as well if you're new to my channel. And if you really enjoyed the content, feel free to join and become a member. Don't forget about my fight against cancel culture. That's in the link in the description below. Support my fight against cancel culture. Go to that link and all the information is there. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching.